In the Middle East, there is a city, beloved and desired beyond measure. Many believed it was the center of the world. Jerusalem. Behind the Footsteps of Jesus, a 14-episode series to deepen in the life of the Messiah and the events related to his death.
Today we'll visit one of the most important places in biblical history and the main religions of the world. The place where the Temple of Solomon once was, and where the Dome of the Rock is found. A place of worship for Muslims, a place also known as the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is one of the main pilgrimages of Muslims, but it's also the main places of pilgrimage for Jews, even though they can only worship at the outer wall of the temple compound, also known as the Wailing Wall. It's also a big tourist attraction for Christians. The Temple Mount is a hill which abruptly descends from north to south. It rises above the Kidron Valley to the east and the Tyropoeon Valley to the west, and its summit reaches a height of 740 meters. In approximately the year 19 BC, Herod the Great expanded the natural plateau of the mount by closing the area with 4 massive retaining walls and filling the gaps. This artificial expansion resulted in a great flat terrain which today forms the eastern division of the old city of Jerusalem. The trapeze-shaped platform measures 488 meters in the west, where we currently are standing, 407 meters in the east, 315 meters in the north, and 280 meters in the south, reaching a total area of 150,000 meters squared, approximately 37 acres. The northern wall of the mount, along with the northern part of the western wall, is hidden behind the residential buildings. The western wall is the place most visited by Jews, which can be seen here, where the Wailing Wall is located.
The Temple Mount is controlled by Muslim authorities. It is divided in 2 platforms, high platform and low platform. The Dome of the Rock is built on the high platform, with its golden dome, where it is said the print of Muhammad is on the rock, which the Prophet left when, according to tradition, he lifted off on his winged horse that took him to the presence of Allah. It is also said that there is a rock which is believed was used by Abraham to build the altar where he was to sacrifice his son. In technical terms, the Dome of the Rock is not considered a mosque, but it is a place of worship for the Islam. Under this rock, there is a cave called the Pit of Souls. Also, there is another small dome in the same platform called the Dome of the Chain. The high platform can be ascended through several steps located in different places. Some archaeologists believe that the steps which are to the northwest are part of a much bigger stair and destroyed in part, which belonged to the second temple of Zerubbabel. In the low platform there are the Mosque Al-Aqsa to the south end of the Temple Mount, covering the major part of the width of the area. Gardens cover the eastern and northern part of the low platform. In the northern part, there is also a Muslim school. The water fountain Al-Qas for the oblation. The waters were originally brought through an aqueduct, which came from Bethlehem, from the fountain of Solomon. All of this area is now identified with the Arabic term Al-Haram Al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, or also known as the esplanade of the mosque. For the Jews, the Temple Mount. Under the low platform, there are several tanks. It is believed that some of them had connection with the sacrifice altar of the second temple, as well as with the laver of brass. Some of these tanks, or cisterns, have a capacity of over 2.5 million liters of water. There are 11 entrances to the Temple Mount, 10 for the Muslims and 1 for the non-Muslims, where they can go in at unlimited days and times. Due to religious and political differences, it hasn't been possible to carry out many archaeological excavations, but a project was carried out to shake the ground, which was removed from the constructions realized in the place by the Muslim authorities. In this search, more than 4,300 coins were found from different periods, mainly from the age previous to the destruction of the Second Temple by Roman legions in the year 70. Furthermore, many Babylonian arrowheads were found which are over 2,500 years old from the time of Nebuchadnezzar's conquest. Besides that, it was found that parts of ceramics which were on the floor of the temple court, mentioned by Josephus, a historian, were also discovered.
The history of the Temple Mount has gone through many chapters since the time of Christ until today. After the destruction of the temple in the year 70 AD by the Roman armies, the Emperor Hadrian from Rome built a temple on the Temple Mount in the year 130 AD, dedicated to Jupiter, with a great statue of Jupiter and a great statue of Hadrian as a god. Sacrifices of pigs were done there in honor of the god Jupiter. After the Council of Nicaea, in the year 325 AD, the Emperor Constantine commanded that the temple of Jupiter be demolished. Based on the archaeological discoveries found in this area, it's believed that a church or monastery was built there afterwards. In the year 610 AD, the area was once again given over to Jewish control, which began the reconstruction of the temple. But shortly afterwards, in 615 AD, the area was again in the hands of the Persians. The Persians gave the control of the Temple Mount to the Christians, who destroyed the Jewish construction.
In the year 637, Jerusalem passes into the hands of the Arabics, who in the year 691 finished the construction of the Dome of the Rock under the Caliphate Abd al-Malik, and in 701 they completed the construction of the Mosque al-Aqsa because of the Caliphate of al-Walid, buildings which remain in place until today. Catholic Crusades gave the control back to Jerusalem in 1099 and used the Mosque al-Aqsa as the Temple of Solomon. The Order of the Templar Knights was the one which carried out the Crusades in Jerusalem, and they managed the place, regarding it as their headquarters. In the year 1244, the Turkish took control of the city of Jerusalem, and the temple passed again into the hands of Muslims. It was followed by military conflicts until finally in 1516, the Temple Mount was left in the hands of the Ottoman Empire with a great Muslim influence until today. In 1757, a regulation called Statu Quo was applied to the holy places of Jerusalem, which is still in force today. This Statu Quo says that it cannot be prohibited the free practice of the religion, but it also mentioned that Muslim places will remain under the Muslim control. Due to disputes that have emerged because of those visits, the entry of the Jews to the Temple Mount has been limited in many opportunities. Similarly, in some instances, the entry has been limited to the Muslims to the Temple Mount by the Israeli army that controls the area to avoid conflicts. In the last decade, several attempts have been made by the extremist Jews to destroy the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, but they have been unsuccessful. The area continues experiencing constant tensions, especially between Jews and Muslims, for having control of it.
The beginning of the history of the Temple Mount goes back to the times of Abraham, when God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son. God led Abraham to Mount Moriah, where by faith, Abraham saw the upcoming sacrifice of the Son of God. He could, in a figurative way, see what would happen in the future on Mount Moriah or in Jerusalem. It said that the rock that's inside the dome of the rock was part of the altar where Abraham was to sacrifice his son. This same Mount Moriah was the place where God showed David that he would buy the property of Ornan the Jebusite and carry it as sacrifice to God as he asked for his mercy. It was there where God sent fire from heaven accepting the sacrifice. David decided to dedicate the place so that the house of God would be built there. We can read about this in 1 Chronicles chapter 21. David was old, and God told him that his son would be the one who would build the temple, not him. David had shed a lot of blood in wars, and his son would be an ambassador of peace. And it was so. Solomon began this magnificent work. In 2 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1 we read, "Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." There was great joy when the day of the temple's dedication arrived. In 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 3 we read, "And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshipped and praised the Lord, saying, For he is good, for his mercy endureth forever."
Unfortunately, in the days of the Babylonian Empire, the people turned away from God, and Nebuchadnezzar came with his army, destroying both the city of Jerusalem and the temple built by Solomon, and carried the utensils of the temple to Babylon. After 70 years, the people could come back to Jerusalem and rebuild the beloved city. God aroused Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple, and there was great joy when the work was begun, and the cornerstones of the second temple were placed again, even though many who remember the first temple cried, merging weepings with shouts of praise, as it is written in Ezra chapter 3 verses 12 and 13. The second temple did not have the presence of God in the most holy place as the first temple did. Neither it had the original Ark of the Covenant, because it had been hidden before Jerusalem was taken by Nebuchadnezzar.
But there was a special promise given for the second temple. The prophet Haggai in Haggai chapter 2 verse 9 wrote, "The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts." It was in the time of the second temple that Christ carried out his earthly ministry in Jerusalem. Christ came to bring light to the Jews and show them the true way to the Father. On 2 occasions, he cleaned the temple from the system or formality that the priests had introduced. Jesus lifted up his voice in the temple to bring hope and peace to a people immersed in traditions and customs. Christ, the Lamb of God, was sacrificed on Calvary. At the moment of his sacrifice, the veil of the temple was torn in two, giving a clear message that the ritual ceremonies had finished. Christ filled the second temple with glory through his presence and his ministry. The Jewish people had many opportunities, but they rejected them. For 2,000 years, they had traveled from far to the Wailing Wall, one of the main places of Judaism. It's an area 60 meters long that remains as part of the second temple, and is where Jews lament over the loss of the temple and the beloved city. Their main prayer is to be able to worship at the Temple Mount once again and to experience the coming of the Messiah. The Messiah, Jesus, the desired of ages. He's not in the tomb. He lives. Today he wants to dwell in the temple of our life. Let's open our hearts so that we don't lose the chance to experience the transforming power, and so that we don't lose out and we be able to reach the Mount of God, the New Jerusalem, the holy city, the heavenly city. Revelation chapter 21 verse 2-3 tells us, "And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God."